This morning we
par l'ordre.
heard
Bertrand Piccard, dont l'exploit récent est connu, de même que toutes les expériences, aventures qui à la fois pour fournir du rêve et de la connaissance scientifique et de l'expérience en matière d'écologie à tant donné. Corinne Lepage, je ne suis pas alors, pardon. Ensuite, enfin je serai quoi. Roberto Peccei, qui comme savant et comme vice-président du Club de Rome s'adressera à vous, Hamadoun Touré, le secrétaire général de l'Union internationale des communications, qui dans son expérience institutionnelle, mais aussi dans son regard sur l'Afrique, apportera un regard intéressant. Corinne Lepage, ancienne ministre, qui est sans doute, pardon Madame le ministre de le dire comme ça, mais la langue la mieux pendue en matière d'écologie, et ça compte aussi, sans doute, mais aussi bien sûr dans son expérience de ministre, dans sa connaissance fine des dossiers, a beaucoup à apporter à cette discussion. Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker, co-président du Club de Rome. Je me permets un souvenir personnel, monsieur. Je me souviens très bien que quand j'étais enfant, ma mère me parlait toujours du Club de Rome et qu'elle disait toujours dans 10 ans, dans 20 ans, dans 50 ans, on verra qu'ils avaient raison. Je ne sais pas si vous avez toujours eu raison, mais en tout cas votre rôle de visionnaire a joué un rôle capital au cours des dernières décennies. Et puis, Madeleine Feyock, vous êtes étudiante, vous êtes, je crois que c'est inutile de le dire, la plus jeune à cette table. Et c'est peut-être par vous que nous allons commencer, si vous le permettez. Vous êtes né en 1988, un an avant la chute du mur de Berlin. Et j'aimerais commencer ici par Mikhaïl Gorbatchev. Nous avons tous été émus de revoir Mikhaïl Gorbatchev hier, de penser à ce qu'il a représenté pour plusieurs générations ici. Le fait qu'un homme joue un rôle si important pour faire changer un système, qu'il ait autant d'énergie, qu'il ait autant de vision, qu'il puisse se tromper aussi, mais que le résultat historique, sans faire couler le sang, soit aussi extraordinaire. Est-ce que c'est une source d'inspiration pour la manière d'être écologiste? Quel souvenir vous avez de ça et quelle inspiration ça vous donne dans le combat écologique? Vous êtes la plus jeune, vous aviez un an au moment du mur de Berlin. Est-ce que ce sont des événements qui font écho?
When the Berlin Wall fell. Are you struck by these events even now? Are they important to you? Madeleine Feyock.
I'm struck by what happened in 1989, if that affects my life today. Yes, a little bit, because I was born in Western Germany, and I moved to Austria when I was only a little kid, so for me it was kind of weird that having to move, I needed an Austrian mother, otherwise it would not have been possible to move. And I was always a little bit between the two cultures, even though they're not so different. But for me, it was nice to see that Europe got more and more united, because I felt more and more like a European citizen, and I felt more that people understood me better. So the events there and the changes that happened and have happened over the last years, all in environmental, ecological and social changes, they made me feel like more like that everyone understood where I was coming from.
Thank you. Corinne Lepage. Microphone, please.
You
acted in politics, such an important change within a system. What inspiration do you derive from that for environmental work?
Que nous ayons la même chose pour l'écologie.
The dream that we
Monsieur Gorbatchev fait partie de ces très rares humains qui ont été en capacité de changer le monde.
Who has been able to change the world. Many of us dream of doing that, and very few of us manage it. He managed it, and I would say that at the stage we've reached in the world today, whereas there are people like Mr. Peccei and Mr. Weizsäcker who, for years and years,
sont lucides.
Have been clear-sighted, and some of us have been able to follow in their wake. But sometimes I've wondered what result did all this achieve. At the stage we've reached today, we vitally need
à travers une personne
through an individual
cette nécessité absolue de changer de braquet. Mais ça ne sera possible
need to change
que dans la mesure où
nous pouvons
aussi derrière changer le rapport de force.
At the same time, we're able to change the relations of power. If Mr. Gorbachev managed to do what he did in the Soviet Union, it's because the time was ripe.
Pour changer le rapport de force.
Has mankind reached a time that is ripe to bring about a change in the balance of power and to ensure that the new economy, civil society, non-governmental organizations are able to really build this future that we all need. This is the question we have to tackle. Thank you, says the moderator, Mr. von Weizsäcker.
L'opinion est très mûre. Corinne Lepage parle de mûrissement. En Allemagne, on a l'impression que les Allemands, depuis des années, étaient avant nous.
We've got the impression for years that in Germany, everyone is years ahead of us. Does that change anything for you?
I'm not supposed to speak about Germany. I'd rather speak about the Club of Rome and what Corinne Lepage has said. I believe that you rightly highlighted the need for non-governmental forces. But the real force today is the market, private sector. And unless we rebalance public with private forces, we have no chance at all. Presently, the greedy private sector wants ever more, while the state trying to observe the limits to growth is being demolished almost, and the NGOs could perhaps help resurrect. But what we definitely have to understand is that our lifestyles are not compatible with the size of our planet. If all 7 billion people on Earth were living lifestyles like in the USA, we would need 5 planets Earth. So we have to change dramatically to make do with that one planet Earth. And that essentially leaves us 3 options. Either reduce the number of people from 7 to perhaps 1.5 billion and allow them American lifestyles, or reduce the consumption of 7 billion to the poorest of today and limit the consumption of others, or find ways of decoupling well-being and wealth from resource consumption. And I suggest, and in this case I believe I'm speaking on behalf of the Club of Rome, that this third option is by far the most attractive.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please. Microphone.
J'aimerais que vous poursuiviez Bertrand Piccard sur les 2 points que M. von Weizsäcker a relevés sur l'économie privée. Parce que vous avez été très souvent en contact avec eux, notamment pour faire financer simplement les projets, mais pas seulement. Est-ce que dans leur monde, le changement est possible? Et puis l'autre question, qui est celle du mode de vie. Est-ce qu'on peut réellement changer de mode de vie? Mais d'abord sur l'économie privée.
But first of all, could you talk about the private sector?
En fait,
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start indeed by saying that whenever I'm in international debates on the environment, I feel very depressed.
Parce que on entend parler de graves problèmes,
serious problems on the one
on entend
hand.
parler d'obligation d'agir,
About the obligation
on entend
incumbent
parler
on all
de
of
tout ce que
us to
ça va
act.
coûter
We hear about how
pour
much it's going
agir,
to cost
de toutes les
to
difficultés
act,
de fédérer
all the
ceux qui doivent
difficulties
agir.
that there are in
Et en
bringing
fin de
everyone
compte,
together
on a très, très peu
to
qui
act.
change.
And then in the final
Parce que je ne
analysis,
pense
very
pas
little
qu'on puisse
changes, because
motiver
I don't
les gens
think we can
en leur parlant de graves problèmes qui coûtent
energize
très cher
people
et qui
by
sont
telling
très
them about
compliqués à
serious
résoudre.
problems that are very expensive and very
pense que ce
difficult
qui est
to resolve.
fondamental,
I think what is
c'est de parler de
essential is to
solutions
talk about solutions
rentables,
which are
concrètes et enthousiasmantes.
profitable, down to earth and exciting. If we focus on specific solutions which will bring in money and will inspire people, will fill the conference rooms, will fill the symposia on the environment, we'll have the private sector knocking at the door, not only the political world, which is unable to solve current problems because it no longer has the means to do so. The private sector doesn't pollute just because it likes to. The private sector pollutes just like all of the rest of us do, because you have to pay people's salaries and wages. You have to come up with results. And we all, as mankind, as people, want the best possible life for ourselves, the most comfort.
C'est qu'une grande partie des solutions peuvent être technologiques. Si vous demandez activement à la population de diminuer sa mobilité, de diminuer son confort, de diminuer sa croissance et de diminuer sa consommation, vous n'aurez jamais une adhésion.
You will never get people on your side. If, on the other hand, you give them technological possibilities with what we call clean technologies,
de permettre à la fois de créer des emplois,
de créer une croissance durable et de faire du profit, bring about sustainable growth and make profits.
En protégeant l'environnement,
and at the same time, you protect the environment, reduce energy consumption, and you diminish the impact on the environment. You will have everybody rooting for you. And this is where we need to go, because big speeches don't really help at all. They don't bring solutions. We have to come up with tangible, profitable solutions. Thank you, Bertrand Piccard.
Comme savant,
says the moderator. Roberto Peccei.
Comme savant, comme représentant du Club de Rome aussi, votre prise de parole et aussi votre réaction à ce que dit Bertrand Piccard sur cette écologie positive.
This positive use of economic forces.
Well, I think it's really important to be positive. In fact, one of the shames is that people are always looking at the negative side of things. On the other hand, we're moving very slowly. As a scientist, I like numbers. And numbers tell me that we're not moving at a rate that will actually be very, very good. I'll give you an example. We're investing right now in renewable energy, about $250 billion. We are subsidizing fossil fuel industry by $500 billion. That's double the amount of subsidies. We have to be much more proactive and try to sort of describe the agenda that Piccard described so well, and say, what do we need to do to move along that path, and not get ourselves mesmerized by false ideas, like, for example, the shale gas will solve all the problems. So we must be much more precise in what we want to do.
Hamadoun, Touré. Permettez-moi un souvenir personnel, vous étiez une fois sur notre plateau de journal télévisé et vous avez parlé évidemment comme vous responsable international, mais aussi comme africain. Vous parliez de Tombouctou. Et vous parliez d'un monde à Tombouctou qui était menacé par les extrémistes, mais c'est un autre sujet. Et des souvenirs extraordinaires de cette ville qui est une des plus mythiques et des plus extraordinaires du monde. Ça paraît si loin. Est-ce que là-bas, l'écologie au temps de votre enfance signifiait quelque chose? Est-ce que l'écologie aujourd'hui signifie quelque chose? De quelle manière?
Merci. Évidemment, j'étais avec vous sur le plateau pendant cette occupation au Mali. Et si je revois la ville de Tombouctou qui était à la porte du désert dans les années de mon enfance, et centre du désert aujourd'hui.
That city is the center of the desert right now, because the desert is encroaching at a huge pace, hugely fast pace. Like Mr. Piccard, I have great worries over the way in which the discussion is developing. I was in Copenhagen at COP15, and I was amazed to see that the whole issue there was deciding who should be punished. And whose fault it all was.
Cette habitude-là, c'est humain.
Well, it's human perhaps to do this, to always try to find the guilty one. But I would ask the question, why don't we work on solutions? Everyone has solutions up their sleeve. I think that technology, information and communication technology, which underpin the work that I'm doing in the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, is part and parcel of the solution. The greenhouse gas emissions,
la technologie de l'information et de la communication contribue pour 2,5%.
Something that are contributed by ICT to the tune of 2.5%. So we are part of the solution, I think, and not part of the problem. That's how we should see it anyway. And that's how we should work with that attitude. We should see how we can work together to try to make these solutions a reality. It is these simple solutions that can open up a new path. Just a little example, in the ITU, we have standardized the charges of mobile phones. This has brought a savings of 80,000 tons of CO2 per year. And we're talking about 13 billion cubic meters of CO2 that could be saved. Just using this simple solution.
Exemples précisément. Celui-ci est impressionnant. Quels exemples? Je m'adresse à toute la table parce qu'à chaque fois, il y a des déceptions. La voiture électrique, par exemple, je me rappelle très bien les espoirs qu'il y avait au début, et ensuite, les bilans ont dit, si on compte tout depuis la fabrication de la voiture, finalement, le bilan final n'est pas si bon. Quels exemples récents vous ont vraiment frappé qui font que l'argent, la technologie, le marché, le capitalisme, une forme d'écologie heureuse peuvent aller ensemble. Quels exemples concrets de cela?
Positive environmentalism could really work. What are some examples? Bertrand Piccard, could you touch on that, please?
Quand on entend le directeur général de General Motors déclarer il y a un mois que Tesla représente probablement un problème pour l'industrie automobile, on voit que les voitures électriques ont un avenir immense. Mais c'est sûr que ce ne seront pas les constructeurs automobiles qui feront les meilleures voitures électriques, ce sont ceux qui viendront de l'extérieur. Elon Musk est un milliardaire qui a fait sa fortune sur Internet. Et comme il ne savait pas faire une voiture conventionnelle, il a fait une voiture révolutionnaire. C'est ça qui est extraordinaire. C'est de voir que toutes les solutions existent et elles viennent en dehors du système.
Come in from the outside of the system. The ones who are outside the box. It's not the ones who invented the candle that will be able to invent the electric light bulb. It's someone else who will do that. And right now, we have to realize something clearly. On the market today, we find enough technology available
pour la construction de bâtiments et pour l'éclairage public et pour le chauffage et l'air conditionné, suffisamment de technologie pour diviser par deux la consommation énergétique du monde et pour produire la moitié de nos besoins avec du renouvelable. Vous pouvez faire les calculs, vous arriverez tous au même résultat. Pourquoi est-ce que ça ne se fait pas? Ça ne se fait pas à cause du poids, de la peur du changement, de l'inertie des habitudes et de certaines personnes qui n'ont pas compris que c'est dans leur intérêt personnel de changer. Et c'est pas par lobby, c'est par société. Quand vous voyez que Total, le pétrolier français, a racheté la meilleure société au monde de panneaux solaires, vous voyez qu'il y a de l'espoir. Mais par contre, tant qu'il n'y a pas de direction politique claire, tant que le secteur privé, puisqu'on revient au secteur privé, ne sait pas où investir, parce que les gouvernements changent d'avis tout le temps, entre le solaire, entre l'éolien, entre les gaz de schiste, entre le retour au nucléaire, eh bien c'est vrai que ce sera extrêmement difficile pour le secteur privé de savoir où investir dans ces technologies, et ces technologies resteront dans des laboratoires, des start-up et des universités au lieu d'arriver chez le consommateur final.
Oui, moi je partage tout à fait ce que vient de dire M. Piccard, et je pense qu'il y a une grande difficulté dans la comptabilité. C'est-à-dire, vous dites,
accounting, the way accounts are kept. You quite rightly said that we have a struggle between the new economy and the old economy, but we also have a struggle between the traditional way of doing accounting and the way we really should keep the books. It's quite clear that if accounting took into account what are called externalities, positive and negative externalities. Let's be constructive here, and I entirely agree with what's been said. If we had accountancy that took into account externalities, then our choices would be much simpler. As a result, I think one of the most important reforms we could carry out is a reform in public accounts and international accounts. If we stop starting thinking in terms of the conventional GDP, but indicators of economic efficiency, the whole series of criteria, I'm not going to go into the details here, but the calculations we would make would be different, the economy different, the investment choices would be different. Then this is the responsibility of the public authorities. But the public authorities are not doing it. Everyone says, yes, the GDP doesn't tell you anything, the GDP doesn't mean anything, but no one's changing it. Mr. Weizsäcker, do you agree with these optimistic views put forward by Bertrand Piccard?
Of course I'm all optimistic. However, looking at what is currently happening in the world energy domain, it's essentially the obsession with shale gas. Not with solar. No, it's shale gas. Adding fossil fuels consumption. Adding to the greenhouse effect. And calling that progress. The opposite is, of course, true, but the current situation of the world is going in a very, very ill, destructive direction. So, the political goal will be to change this kind of direction, and it will not come from the private sector.
Bertrand Piccard, sur ce point.
Would you like to pick up on that?
Il y a quelque chose qui est très marquant quand on parle d'énergie, c'est qu'il s'agit toujours pour l'humanité de créer davantage de sources d'énergie.
Mankind, we're always looking for creating new sources of energy, and I agree with Mr. Weizsäcker. We think that things are going to work better because we found reserves of shale oil, but it's the same metaphor of someone in a bathtub. You're having your bath, but you don't have the plug and the water is flowing out of the bath. So instead of putting the plug in and stop the water flowing away, you turn the tap up more to keep the bath full. The best thing for mankind today, not just for a few small companies producing energy, what is most profitable for mankind today to create jobs, to create profits in society, is not producing energy, it's saving energy. That's what we need to focus on, energy saving. That'll create jobs, that'll create profits. The technologies are there to save energy. When I speak of energy savings, I'm talking not just about insulation in houses or LED lights, new metal alloys for gearboxes for cars, paint coverings for boats to make them more friction resistant. Hundreds of technologies which together will help us to reduce our energy consumption. This is what we need to focus on. This is what we need to tell people about, because we have this idea that we need more and more energy, that'll give money, that'll drive the economy, but the results will come from energy savings. Yes, Bertrand Piccard, says the moderator, I agree. I'm just trying to provoke discussion. These are issues that have been talked about a long time. There's been a lot of progress, but we don't seem to be moving forward. We still seem to be consuming a lot of energy. We still don't seem to have these technologies affecting us in our daily lives. Mr. Peccei, what's your opinion on this point? In people's daily lives, are we starting to see the effects of what Bertrand Piccard just described?
What Piccard says is absolutely the truth. What happens is that people get mesmerized by different ideas. I mean, there are tremendous opportunities in saving energy, in new technologies for doing things in a better way. For example, what happened in California in the 1970s was that they looked at efficiency measures for energy. And in fact, California has been at the forefront just because they have emphasized efficiency in energy production. But the point is that we know that if you think 100 years from now, do you think we're going to have the same energy system as we have now? Absolutely not. It's crazy. So why are we not moving toward that system instead of imagining that we can just repeat what we do all the time? So I think it's very important to give particularly young people ideas that they should invest in new things. Elon Musk is a tremendous example. I mean, he's an extremely clever fellow. He's putting his money where his mouth is. I think he'll be extremely successful, and General Motors will be General Motors in a bad way, as it's been for a while.
for a moment, California in the 1970s had a marvelous invention. The so-called Public Utility Commission decided not to license any additional power plant unless the utility was proving that that additional power plant would solve the energy demand problem cheaper than efficiency on the customer side. And of course the utilities failed to prove. And then they were forced to help their customers using less energy. The question is, of course, how can then the utilities survive? Well, the answer is twofold. One, by not building that new power plant, they saved a lot of capital. So all the capital costs more or less vanished. And second, the Public Utility Commission allowed them to take higher prices per kilowatt hour, so that as long as the monthly energy bill was reducing, efficiency was the game winner, while new power was the game loser. And that is, I believe, the new kind of economy that we need, where companies earn more money by selling less.
Hamadoun Touré.
Let me just express my disagreement when private sector is to be blamed for everything here. My organization is the oldest organization of the United Nations family. We're going to celebrate 150 years in 2 years' time, in 2015. And we have a very strong cooperation between private sector and public sector. In addition to our 193 member states, we have over 700 private companies working hand in hand. Private sector can do good if it's well regulated. Of course, too much regulation will kill the sector as well. But it needs to be lightly regulated, better regulated. However, we know that the financial crisis in the world has been due to the total lack of regulation in the financial sector. But the telecommunication and ICT sector is well regulated so far. And with that, I think some positive results can be achieved. And therefore, I would like to show a number of success stories that are made when private sector is trusted, is made in test, but also where policy and regulation are well made. Therefore, there is a role for both the public sector and the private sector in this problem to find the solutions.
Sur les politiques ont été un peu épinglées dans plusieurs de vos interventions. Alors il y en a en tout cas deux assez ciblées, peuvent être soumis, qui ont été soumis à l'élection. C'est Corinne Lepage et Hamadoun Touré. Hamadoun Touré, peut-être que vous reviendrez un jour comme président du Mali dans cette salle. Corinne Lepage, est-ce que vous avez vraiment rencontré des politiques sincèrement concernés par l'écologie? Vous avez pratiqué Jacques Chirac, mais d'autres aussi. Est-ce qu'ils y croient? Est-ce que vraiment c'est quelque chose qui les concerne, ou bien au fond, c'est une vague sur laquelle ils surfent?
Is it just a fad
Ou ils ne
for
surfent
them?
pas.
No, it's not a fad. They're not surfing on a wave.
D'abord, je vais vous dire,
First of all, let me tell you
je pense qu'il y a beaucoup
that I think
de manque de formation,
there's a lot
de manque de
of
compétences sur ces sujets.
information
le monde,
and
le monde
knowledge
politique,
lacking in
connais,
these subjects.
qui est un peu le monde politique
Politics,
français,
the
disons un peu le monde
world, the
politique
politics which is I know,
Mis à part l'Allemagne,
French politics,
et les
European
pays du nord
politics,
de
apart from
l'Europe
Germany
qui
and the countries of the
ont
north of
une
Europe,
vraie
which really
culture
do have an
dans ce
environmental
et
culture.
qui savent
So apart
penser
from Germany
économie
and the northern countries,
avec écologie.
they think that which know
Pour
that
le
they can
reste
combine the
de ce
economy
que
with the
j'ai vu
ecology.
fonctionner,
Otherwise,
ça
from what I've
reste
seen in European politics,
quelque chose d'extrêmement lointain.
it is seen as something very distant, far
il y a
off.
souvent la tentation de déléguer
Often, politicians
la
attempted to
partie verte
delegate
le soin de s'occuper de l'écologie
to the local
comme si
Green
c'était un monde à
Party,
part.
and they'll take care of the
Et ça,
environment
je
as if
pense
it was
que
something
c'est
separate,
tout à
a
fait
different issue
catastrophique.
completely. And I think that
Parce
is
que
a
dans
disaster.
la grande transformation que nous
Because
vivons,
in the major changes we are living
non
through,
pas en crise,
because
mais en
we're
grande
living
transformation.
in a world, not a world in crisis,
il
but
y a
a world
donc
undergoing a
une
major
forme
transformation. And
d'incapacité
in this
de penser
transformation,
ensemble
there seems to be an inability to put our heads together and think these issues through. What we call the environment, which is actually the physical nature of our planet,
avec les questions économiques et sociales.
Needs to be combined with social and economic issues. We often speak about sustainable development, the 3 pillars of sustainable development. Kilograms and kilograms, tons of books have been produced on the subject, but in real life they are not separate. Here I would add, as a European Member of Parliament, I see today the power of the economic forces of the old economy. I'm thinking in particular of the old energy producers. They still have a lot of power, a lot of influence. I see this in the European Parliament, which means that decisions which for each of us might seem logical, common sense decisions are not being taken simply because of the power of a particular economic interest, which is very influential, which is playing the power politics of protecting their markets, excluding others. And until politicians are strong enough to break away from that, until we have a powerful economic sector, as Mr. Piccard said, it's very important, of the new economy. Let's take the case of shale gas. We have tremendous pressure to develop shale oil, shale gas. We're in the 21st century, but that's actually a 19th century industry, mining. It's absurd to go back. But everyone has put it forward as the latest thing. That's wrong. Well, why is shale gas being put forward as the latest thing? Well, because the short-term economic interests of those who are earning a lot of money from shale gas and who do not want to pay anything for the consequences of what they're going to do. That's why I talked about changing accounting to take into account those externalities. It's there in their short-term interest. They don't care about the environment and what it does to the environment. This brings us back to what I was saying about the positive ecology. We need to create a powerful industry calling for more regulation over these activities, changing for a change in accounting practices, calling for a change in lifestyle. And once we can balance that out, balance the new economy against the old economy, then we'll start to make progress.
No, I fully agree with that because, I mean, the politicians, unfortunately, their longest term vision is the next elections. And it's just like the private sector, too, has to be blamed in that as well because their longest term vision is the next quarterly report. So it's even shorter. So, but we have to find ways and to create institutions that will be able to combine a longer term vision that is in the interest of everyone. And institutions like the European Commission are bringing together to many countries so that they will be forced to add their solutions. I've been in Switzerland for almost 15 years now, and I admire the Swiss system where the system does no longer depend on the current politicians that are in power, and their combined efforts are added to the efforts of others, which is very, very commendable.
Bertrand Piccard, les politiciens, vous avez beaucoup vu. Ils cherchent la photo hop, comme on dit avec vous, être à côté de vous, c'est pas mal quand vous réussissez un exploit aussi extraordinaire que celui des États-Unis encore si récemment. Votre regard sur eux dans cette affaire.
How do you view them?
C'est vrai qu'il y a un certain opportunisme. C'est vrai que Solar Impulse joue aussi là-dessus.
But it's true that Solar Impulse is also part of the picture because it brings together politicians when they have a photo op with a solar power group, then can't say, well, there's no future in solar power, so we take advantage of those photo opportunities to get the message across. But I think you have to look at the role of politicians in a much broader picture. Let me give you an example. Bayer, the German company, invented a system to save 30% of electricity in the production of chlorine. Chlorine, I didn't know this, I don't know if you know this, but chlorine is one of the most manufactured products in the world. It's a substance that's produced in tremendous quantities. Most produced subjects. In Europe, no one knows you can use this new technology to save 30% of your energy to produce chlorine. In China, as soon as they heard about this, they gave their chlorine industry 1 year to totally go over to the bio system of production, which is more energy efficient. So you see, the role of politicians is fundamental. The private sector doesn't pollute because they like it, they pollute because they want to sell our products. You need to have the regulations there. Let me ask you a question. Do you know why we don't dump waste in the forest? We don't dump waste in the forest today. They used to do this because it was banned. People can't dump their waste in the forest anymore. So why is it still possible to release as much CO2 as you want into the atmosphere? Well, because you're allowed to. There's no law to prevent you doing it. Nothing stops you from having a car, driving in town with a car that consumes 30 litres to drive 100 kilometers. But there's a technology which allows you to use 3 litres to travel 100 kilometers by car. And this is where politicians can act. The role of politicians is not to impede the economy, but rather to set a limit, a maximum limit for energy consumption on the basis of what can be done with new technologies. Once politicians start doing that, there will be a real revolution.
Bertrand Piccard, merci.
Thank you.
J'aimerais que vous disiez un mot sur le saut des générations. Plusieurs générations sont représentées ici.
The change of generations. There are several generations here. And I'm always struck by the fact that the generation gap is much greater than you think. Whatever you talk about, when we think that you're only 1 year old when the Berlin Wall came down, you obviously have a different perception from other generations. The panelists, what would you ask our guest, Madeleine, who's 24 years old, who's a student, what questions would you ask her about what she expects from the environment, what she's prepared to do, what she refuses to do? Who dares to ask her a question? Of course, when they ask the question, you'll have to answer it, but who would like to ask Madeleine a question about how she sees things?
Qu'est-ce qui peut nous faire penser, what can help us to believe that the next generation will be different from ours, and that the next generation is going to make less mistakes than we did?
Because we have to. I think that for us it's not a question, do we want to change, but we actually have to, because the impact we're already feeling. And that's why I think it's important that you always talk about the private and the public sector, but the real question or the real challenge is to include the people, to include everybody, to be able to change and to be able to make an impact in a sustainable development, because I think that a lot of people don't have the knowledge and they don't know how to participate and where, because it's easy if you know, and it's easy to start small. You have to start small, but a lot of people don't know it. They don't have the knowledge or the money or the infrastructure to actually participate, and I think that is the real challenge, and that is what our generation have to do, because for us it's necessary.
Alors, Hamadoun Touré, quelle question vous posez à l'autre génération?
What question would you like to ask the up-and-coming generation?
Just would like to ask her what is she expecting from the older generation? Because we've been talking all the time. We want to hear from you too. What you expecting from us?
It's a little bit pessimistic if I say not too much. I think it's you cannot rely on older generations to act for you but I would expect some support for young people who are willing to give their time and their energy and their money to start up a new, for example, company or a new NGO or whatever. That older generations support them with their knowledge and their experience, because that's what we can benefit most from.
That's the point. We're trying to teach things to the newer generation when they are way ahead of us. We're not listening enough, and this generation has failed, and is failing to even recognizing the failure. That's the biggest problem.
I think it's not only that the older generations have failed, but the younger generation wants to go in a different direction, probably, because they see the issues already from the start in a different perspective.
Quelqu'un veut encore poser une question?
Would anyone else like to ask a question?
Oui. Bien sûr.
Yes, of course. Corinne Lepage, you can ask a question.
De quels outils
What tools would you dream of having to allow young people, the younger generation, to change gears, to change things over the older generation? What would you like to have as tools that young people can use so their voices can be heard?
That's a difficult question, but I'll try to answer it. The tools that I would like to have is to include everybody, to educate everybody in order to be able to change and make an impact, that everybody gets the education in order to be able and participate, and that we have the that we have the opportunity to create something sustainable while including everybody, not excluding people who are living in the countryside, who are not that wealthy, who are not that well educated, but actually to make everybody a part of it. That is the tool I would like, that everybody is in some way contributing to the big picture.
J'aimerais vous entendre, mesdames, messieurs, pour conclure l'un après l'autre sur là où est née votre conviction écologique, mais vraiment
where your environmental awareness came from. Going back to the beginning, I remember that in college I was by Pascal, who said that I'm Christian because the Christian religion is the only religion for which martyrs are prepared to die. Pascal speaking about Christianity. In today's world, as a journalist, I rarely meet people who have such a strong conviction that they'd be prepared to die for it. Islamists, for example, of course, with all the destruction they can cause as Islamists prepared to die. But they have that strength, they have a faith that they're prepared to die for.
Est-ce que vous avez une foi?
Environmentalism, do you have convictions, do you have faith, and when did that faith begin? Not just the feeling that we all have nowadays that the environment is important. The public opinion accepts that. I think everyone knows that now. Only a few marginal people say the environment's not important. Everyone recognizes the importance of the environment now. But your faith, your belief in the environment, that turning point where you said, yes, the environment is something I want to spend my life fighting for. Where did your belief in the environment come from? One by one, Corinne Lepage? For me, it's quite simple. My belief is linked to the fact that I'm a great believer in justice. And for me, to trample underfoot issues related to the environment is a major injustice you are committing against other people in time and in space. For example, with respect to the future generations, with respect to other human beings that we share this planet with. It is a terrific injustice to them. And my passion for the environment was born in that thirst for justice, not from nature. Afterwards I learned, but it wasn't nature that drove me, it was human beings, and this belief I have that justice is something that should guide all human beings on earth, and if we were all guided by the desire for justice, things would improve. Of course, it's also linked to the fact that I'm a lawyer, and the first cause that I defended as a lawyer, but even before I became a lawyer, it was my feeling of the need for justice. This was, for me, it was a total injustice to prevent people from living, to make them sick, to destroy the world they lived in, and to destroy the future for coming generations. Mr. van Weizsäcker, where does your belief come from? Where does your belief in the environment come from as an environmentalist? When did you start?
Combination of efficiency and sufficiency. Efficiency meaning we can extract 5 or 10 times more well-being, wealth, from 1 kilowatt hour or from 1 hectoliter of water or minerals. Sufficiency means enough is enough. In February this year, together with my friend Ashok Khosla and others, I attended a meeting in Bhutan where the then existing government had a dream of a sufficiency-oriented society, which was fascinating to look at. However, they had democratic elections recently, where this whole government was wiped away because the young generation wanted consumption. They did not want sufficiency. So, in some cases, the young generation can teach the old for better things. But in Bhutan, it was the opposite way. So, we have to join the good dreams of the young and the good dreams of the old.
Monsieur Peccei.
Mr. Peccei?
My comment was more or less akin to what Ernst was saying. What amazes me enormously is that younger people do not realize the enormous mess that we're leaving them in. And I'm really surprised that there are not more people in the street, because if you really look at it, and maybe it's because they like to be cocooned, but in fact they should be on the street, because they're going to find themselves 50 years from now in a very difficult world. And we will merrily go forward and communicate with each other and not really realize. So, you know, your story of Bhutan is very solitary, very sad.
Merci, Hamadoun Touré.
Hamadoun Touré?
My passion came because of my profession. Technology is a part of the solutions, as I always say. And I was very young when President Kennedy, at the time, declared that he will send a man to the moon. I still remember when I go to my little village of my mother and tell, and my uncles always still laugh at me because I'm the one who told them that the man went to the moon. And they still laugh at me, and it's very interesting. And since then, I said to myself, I'll be a satellite engineer, and I will try to find a way to explain to them how a satellite can be, going around the Earth or elsewhere. But it's still a challenge for me to explain to them. But again, I believe in that because I'm a satellite engineer, and satellites play a very key role in mitigating, in observing and monitoring the Earth. They have more than 98% of efficiency over terrestrial means, and therefore my passion came from that.
Et Bertrand Piccard, vous avez une supériorité sur nous tous. Vous avez vu la Terre sous tous les angles.
Have an advantage over all of us. You've seen the Earth from all sides. We went up to get to 12,000 meters with the balloon.
Oui, je sais bien.
What about in the water? That was my father, says the...
Jean-Michel Cousteau parlera sûrement aussi
Jean Cousteau will talk about sea exploration too. I like the sea as well. It's true, moderator. Well, there's so much in your head, I'm sure. But
forme de révélation ou d'intuition qui était plus forte encore, c'était quand?
Epiphany,
mais je crois que davantage qu'un écologiste, je suis un médecin à l'origine. Et en tant que médecin, je sais que l'homme doit développer une qualité de vie, que l'homme doit protéger son environnement interne autant que son environnement externe. Et c'est une pure logique de protéger l'environnement. Maintenant, ce qui m'a donné envie de m'engager, très paradoxalement, ce sont les excès de l'écologie. Pendant très longtemps, l'écologie a pris la nature en otage dans un but politique de promotion du développement de gauche. Et elle s'est forcément coupée du secteur industriel, économique et financier, qui est beaucoup plus souvent à droite. Et ça a fait énormément de tort à la nature d'avoir pendant 40 ans ce fossé entre la gauche et la droite qui se battaient finalement pour des buts complètement différents, simplement pour ne pas s'apporter mutuellement des voix aux prochaines élections. Alors, je pense que ce qui est fondamental maintenant, c'est de sortir de ce clivage, que l'écologie ne doit plus être politisée, et que c'est au secteur industriel, c'est aussi à la droite, de réaliser que c'est son avantage à elle, au niveau économique et au niveau financier, de développer des nouveaux produits dont le monde a besoin. Au moment où on aura réalisé ça, eh
been taken to heart. We will not even need to talk about the environment anymore. We'll just talk about being logical as human beings and shouldering responsibilities, not just for future generations. If you could tell a company executive that he has to protect future generations, whereas he has to break even with 100,000 people on his payroll, he will not be able to do that unless he's given the legal framework and the judicial framework that he needs to protect the environment, because he'll know where he can invest. I think, in other words, the solution lies in politics. So the Example Project has been trying to give arguments to the political world so that to drive home the message that we can achieve the goals that people throw about in vague terms in international settings. It has to be tangible. That's what I'm committed to. Moderator, thank you very much, Bertrand. Piccard, I propose that we give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Voilà, et on vous remercie de votre attention et dans l'attente de la discussion suivante dans quelques instants. Merci beaucoup.
And we look forward to the next panel in just a few moments. Thank you very much.